All right, so let's put all of what we talked about previously into code so we can really understand how to use Dart and create classes which will in turn become objects. So what I'm going to do here real quick, well, by the way, I did create a new project called Intro to Classes, and I'm very confident you can create your own project yourself. So go ahead and do that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of all this boilerplate code for now, and we'll get into it later. But for now, we don't want distractions. So what I'm going to do at the top here, okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a class. Now, to create a class in Dart is very simple. We use keywords and we put the name and then we are done. So I'm going to go ahead and say class. Look at that. We have the class. There we go. I'm going to call this class microphone since we are into microphones. At least I am. And notice now the difference here is that we're not going to add the operator, the function operator, which is usually 2 parentheses. We're actually going to go ahead and put our brackets as such. Okay, so this is how you create a class. So this class is going to be called microphones. In fact, it should be microphone. That's the better naming. Okay, so we said that a class is a blueprint of what is to be an actual object, the real thing. Okay, so with this blueprint, we have to set all of the properties, all of the variables, instance variables as we call them, and everything in between. Okay, now what is an instance variable? Well, an instance variable is just a property of that class. For instance, one of the things that we can have for our class here, we can go ahead and say string name, right? Because a microphone has a name. You can say string color. Okay, and I can create an int, another instance variable here, which can be model. Let's do that. Sorry, model like that. So these are our instance variables. They are variables of the instance of this class. Okay, and sometimes they call member variables as well. So same thing. If you hear member variables, instance variables are the same thing. Now we have a very simplistic class here. All it has is instance variables, string name, color, and int model. Now the idea here is that, well, when we create this blueprint, this class, is that we need to create an actual object that we can start doing things with it. Well, to do that, we go to main here. I can go ahead and say var, and I'm going to call this mic. Let's say is equal to new. This is the keyword that we use to create a new object. This is just telling the compiler that we are going to allocate a place in the memory where we're going to create this object, this real thing, this real microphone. Let's say new microphone as such. You can see there it is. It gives us a hint of what we should type next. Just say enter, and there we go. So now this mic is indeed of type microphone, which means it's the actual object. It's not a blueprint anymore, is the object pointing to the new microphone. Okay, so now we have our mic object. We can do certain things. We can go and say mic dot. Notice the moment we use the operator dot, which means access. What do we want to access? Well, we can access the name, color, model, and so many other things that we haven't discussed yet. We'll talk about later, okay? So now I can set the name to, say, Blue Yeti. That's the name of my microphone. And I can say mic again, dot, color. I'm gonna set it to silver gray. Say mic dot model. It's an integer. Why? Because I set it to be integer. I'm going to say one, just a gibberish number like that. There we go. So now we've created our microphone class at the top, and we have instance variables, right? A few properties there. And then in main here, we wanted to create the actual object. So here we are creating the actual object of type mic, the actual mic. And then we're setting the name to Blue Yeti, color to silver gray, model to 1345. Now, if you go ahead here and say print, we can print this object, which object mic, like that. Let's see what's going to happen. run. It says instance of microphone. This is perfect. What this is saying is that, okay, now when we print the mic itself, it is an instance of microphone, which is the class, which means it's just an object. This is also called instantiating an object, which means creating an instance of a certain object, in this case, the microphone. You say, okay, what if I want to actually show the name, like see what was the name set to? Well, I can go set dot name. All right, if I save this and run, it's going to say Blue Yeti. Because now I'm saying, okay, I have the object, right? But I want to know what is the name of this object. Well, you say mic dot operator, which means access something. I want to access the name. Okay, so the dot so the access operator. Okay, let's say, so you would read this mic access name. So mic object, I want to access the name property or instance variable, and there we go. Now the other thing we can do, we can specify in our class or our blueprint here, if we want to make sure that this int model here, it's always the same, or at least set it to something, to initialize, as they call, to initialize to a certain value, because before we add anything, they are all null, right, if they're not initialized. But if we want to initialize this model, for instance, we can go ahead and say something like this. Notice if I don't add anything to model when I create the object, I would still be able to get this 4536. Let me go to model as such and run. We should be able to get the initial value, which is 4536 that we initialize. Now, if we had initialized still, it would go and override whatever the initial value was. So it's actually the same behavior that we saw with straight variables. The reason why I want you to get this is because this is the basics for everything you do in your programming career, okay? Doesn't matter if you're talking about Dart language or Java or Kotlin or whatever other language, object-oriented programming language, this is the concept that you need to master, okay? Because if you go to an interview, they will ask about classes. And the more you understand this, the more this becomes a second nature, the better off you'll be at an interview, or the better off you'll be understanding really what's happening here. Okay, so use analogies when you explain things, because that usually shows to whoever you explain that you understand what is it that you're trying to explain in an interview or in a conversation with your grandma or friends, if your grandma likes object-oriented programming languages. So that would be a great conversation starter at the dinner party. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to add other instance variables or member variables into our microphone and see if you can set them as we did here, and go ahead and start print them out one by one to see the differences, see whatever we're setting, and also make sure to add some initialization, if you will, for each of these instance variables. Also, do create your own classes, right? And once you create those classes, add those instance variables and so forth, and go ahead and instantiate them, which means create actual objects, the real thing, and then go from there, just like what we did here. Okay, that's really good practice. Perfect. I'll see you next.